Hello and welcome. My name is Mikolas, she, they, and this is Literally Graphic. And today we are looking at 1919, a graphic history of the Winnipeg General Strike by the Graphic History Collective and David Lester. This book was published by Between the Lines in 2019. Content notes for police repression and violence. Looking at the violence specifically, it was interesting how the use of line was really apparent to build up the kinetic energy of the scene. In contrast, it also felt like the more violence that was present in a frame, the looser the art style became. The book overall also leans more towards pretty basic and oversized page layouts, which impacts the pace of the action as well. Looking at the Graphic History Collective, they also collaborated to produce A Direct Action Gets the Goods, a graphic history of the strike in Canada, which I reviewed back in November. The collective kicked off in 2008 to, quote, produce alternative histories, people's histories, in an accessible format to help people understand the historical root of contemporary social issues, end quote. The current members include Sean Carlton, Robin Folvick, Kara Saveright, and Julia Smith. You can find out more and see all of their very interesting posters at their website of the same name. Link in the descriptions. What kinds of keywords apply? 100-year anniversary, violent government repression, capitalism, colonization, solidarity, and workers. Quote, after suffering the hardships and horrors of the First World War, workers and soldiers faced the agony of post-war Canadian economy. With rising inflation, unprecedented unemployment, and an increasingly repressive state, the atmosphere was ripe for revolt. The Russian Czar had been overthrown just 18 months ago, and workers had revolution on their minds. On May 15, 1919, more than 30,000 workers in Winnipeg, Manitoba walked off the job and began a general strike that would last 6 weeks and change the course of Canadian history. The strikers' demands began with higher wages, collective bargaining rights, and more powers for working people. As sympathy strikes broke out and more workers joined the call, the Winnipeg Strike Committee became a de facto government. Like so many labor actions before and since, the strikers were met with a violent end. On Bloody Saturday, the Royal Northwest Mounted Police charged into the crowd, killing 2 workers and injuring dozens more. 100 years later, the Winnipeg General Strike continues to be a poignant reminder of the power of the state and capital over workers' lives, and the brutal ends governments and bosses have and will use to crush workers' movements, and an inspirational example of the possibilities of class struggle and solidarity, end quote. As far as the words per page level, this book does a very good job, especially in contrast to many very dense and generally older labor-related comic books. Even with all of the name-dropping, this felt more like a jumping-off point than trying to be the be-all and end-all on the Winnipeg General Strike. Besides a short set of preface, acknowledgments, introduction, we also got a notes on drawing, a short photo essay, and notes plus bibliography. For just 120 pages, we are coming at the story from many different angles. I do kind of wish there was a bit more in the comic. Some of the full page layouts felt a bit unnecessary, but I have no attention span, so I guess I can't complain. The art overall was pretty striking, and the poses are very energetic. As I've already mentioned, there's some interesting stuff being done around the depiction of violence. My only quibble is it does feel a bit oversized. As far as gender goes, everything seems pretty binary, but we do get a more balanced representation of men and women, which is a nice pushback to some of the patriarchal ideas of yesteryear. I really like how this book stresses the true diversity of tactics that went into this effort. Obviously, industrial society 100 years ago is probably, hopefully, peak ableism, but this representation of diversity also highlights the fact that the most physical stuff is not the only thing that's needed. That said, I wish them having one obvious wheelchair user at the end when we show modern protest doesn't put this book above probably half the labor history comics I've read on this channel. Standards are very low. Sexuality doesn't really come up at all, and I feel like that's fair. class is fairly central, obviously, and while the book does outline what was happening in Canada's colonialist nation-building front at the time, I would have liked to know more about the racial and cultural makeup of Winnipeg at that point. Maybe I missed something, but all I found was one panel about how, quote, John Arthur Robinson and the members of the Order of Sleeping Car Porters joined the strike in its early days and donated to the strike fund. We do get a shout out to Ginger Goodwin, so I will recommend my review of a biography of him entitled Ginger Goodwin, A Worker's Friend. And to fill out my full card capacity, I will recommend Christy Pitts by Jamie Michaels, plus Doug Federal, Nat Turner by Kyle Baker, and Massive Anarchy, the history of a radical poem from Shelley to the Triangle Factory Fire. I'm scheduled to make a whole video outlining all my reviews of more leftist comics, so that's something to look forward to. Circling back to 1919, I think it's a solid 3.5 star read. I'll probably be rounding that up to 4 stars for Goodreads. Bye y'all, keep reading and resist white supremacy. And as always, Literally Graphic is created on land that should be given back to the traditional landholders, which in this case is, to my knowledge, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation.